The golden spires of Zyrathia's palace reached toward the sky. Shining under the light of 3 suns, from every corner of the galaxy, ships came bearing gifts, armies, and promises. Inside, the great throne room stretched longer than a starship. Hangar, with banners from 1,000 worlds hanging high. At its center sat Empress Zyrathia, draped in silver and blue, a crown shaped like the wings of a great bird. Her eyes were bright but unreadable, a storm behind a calm sky for years. Suitors had come, warriors with scars, kings with planets, merchants with vaults of gold. They came with poetry, with songs, with treasures dug from dead suns. Some offered peace treaties, others offered control of fleets that could blot out the stars. But Zyrathia listened, watched, and with a gentle voice said the same thing every time. No. The word was always polite, but it struck like a blade, and every rejected suitor left in silence, never to return. The council grew restless. 10,000 had stood before her, and 10,000 had failed. They whispered in the shadowed corners of the palace halls, saying the Empress was cursed or made of stone. Others claimed she was simply arrogant, waiting for a mate greater than the galaxy itself. But no one could guess the truthless Sarah's heart was guarded not by pride, but by something far deeper, something she had never told anyone. This day, the throne room was full again. A prince from the ice world of Valthor had come, his armor glittering like frost. He bowed low, reciting a speech about joining their houses and ruling the stars together. He offered her half his empire and his sworn life. The court leaned forward, wondering if this would be the one, but the Empress only tilted her head, her gaze cool as winter. "I respect your courage," she said softly, "but my answer is no." The prince's smile froze. He left without another word, his retinue glaring at the throne as they departed, when the great doors shut behind him. Silence filled the room. The council looked at each other, their patience wearing thin. "Your Majesty," one elder began carefully, "the people grow concerned. The throne must be secured. Your mate must be chosen." Zyrathia's voice was steady. "I will choose when I find one worthy." Her eyes swept the hall, daring anyone to press further, and none did. That night, from the highest balcony, she stood alone, watching the stars. The 3 suns had dipped below the horizon, leaving the palace bathed in soft blue light. Beyond the walls, the capital city stretched endlessly, its towers glowing, its streets alive with the hum of alien life. She had everything: power, loyalty, wealth, yet the emptiness in her heart remained. She had once believed she would know when the right one arrived, but after years of searching, she wondered if such a person even existed then. As she gazed at the darkness above, a flicker of movement caught her eye, far in the sky. A small ship was descending toward the palace spaceport. It was nothing like the grand vessels that usually arrived. No polished silver, no royal banners. Its hull was scarred, its paint worn, its engines sounding tired. The guards at the port looked confused, exchanging wary glances. Zyrathia narrowed her eyes. This was no ordinary visitor. Within the hour, word spread through the palace. A lone human had arrived, a human, one of the rarest species in this part of the galaxy. The guards reported that he carried no gifts, wore no armor, and came without an escort. When asked his purpose, he had simply said, "The Empress wanted to see me." The council scoffed, calling it a lie, but Zyrathia's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "Bring him to me," she ordered. The guards hesitated. This broke every rule of formality, but the Empress's tone left no room for argument. When the man entered the throne room, the court fell silent. He was tall for a human, his uniform worn but clean, his eyes sharp yet calm. He walked with the steady pace of someone who had seen danger before and no longer feared it. He stopped at the foot of her throne, not kneeling, not bowing, just looking at her as if she were an equal. Gasps rippled through the hall. No one had ever dared such a thing. "You sent for me," he said simply, his voice carrying across the vast room. The council members exchanged angry whispers. The Empress studied him for a long moment, her expression impossible to read. Then, without looking away, she said to the court, "Leave us." Every noble froze. Such a thing had never happened. "But," she repeated, "leave." And one by one, they obeyed. The massive doors closed with a heavy echo, leaving only the two of them in the throne room. Lethar rose from her seat, descending the steps slowly. Her silver gown whispered against the polished floor. She stopped just a breath away from him. Her gaze locked with his, for the first time in years. Her heart beat faster. She didn't know why, but she could feel it. This man was different, and perhaps he was the one she had been waiting for. Commander Elias Kane stood alone in the vast throne room, the golden pillars towering above him like the ribs of some ancient beast. The air shimmered faintly with the energy fields that kept the palace temperature perfect for the Empress's species. Her throne was empty now, for she had stepped down to stand before him, her silver gown catching the faint light of the moons outside. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority that had silenced kings. "Elias Kane," he replied without hesitation, his gaze steady. "Human fleet officer." "Or I was once," he didn't add more, and she didn't press yet. Instead, she turned and began walking toward a smaller chamber at the side of the hall. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow. The guards at the massive door shifted uneasily as they passed, their alien eyes tracking the humans' every movement. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, rare enough to be considered almost myth by some worlds. Here in Zyrathia's court, they were practically unknown. The whispers had already started. Why was he here? Why did the Empress seem interested? Why did she dismiss the entire court for him when she had turned away thousands? The side chamber was quiet, lined with star maps glowing softly in the air. It smelled faintly of the flowers grown only in the Empress's private gardens. She took a seat at a round crystal table, and after a pause, gestured for him to sit as well. Elias remained standing for a moment, studying the room as if checking for threats. Only then did he sit, leaning forward slightly, hands clasped loosely. "You came here with no escort, no gift, and no request," she said, her eyes searching his face. "Yes," he answered simply. The Empress tilted her head, her silver crown glinting faintly. "Why?" Elias looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I didn't come for your throne," he said quietly. "I came because you called for me." Her brows lifted slightly. "I never sent a summons to your people." "Not in words," he replied. "But the message reached me anyway." For the first time in years, Lethara felt a sharp edge of curiosity cut through her guarded mind. She leaned back slightly, watching him as though trying to see the truth behind his eyes. Elias didn't flinch under her gaze. Most suitors had tried to impress her with rehearsed speeches, grand gestures, or elaborate promises, but this human, he simply existed in the moment, unshaken. Outside the chamber, the court was in turmoil. Nobles gathered in the corridors, speaking in hushed voices. Some believed the human was a spy sent by enemies of the Empire. Others whispered wild theories that he was some ancient champion, that he carried forbidden technology, or that he had bewitched the Empress, Lord Vesric. The most powerful of her rejected suitors stood in the shadows, watching the sealed chamber door. His eyes, narrowed whatever made the Empress dismiss the court, for this man had to be dangerous to him. He swore silently that he would find out. Inside, Lethara rose again. Walking slowly to the star map display, the constellations shifted under her touch, showing distant worlds and trade routes. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "A map of your empire," Elias replied without hesitation. "Correct," she said. "It stretches across hundreds of systems." And yet, I have never found one who sees beyond the power. Elias's eyes flickered to her. Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. That simple sentence struck her more than she expected. She turned to face him fully. I've been offered everything fleets, worlds, immortality serums et. I refuse them all, she said. Then maybe you've been waiting for something you can't be offered, Elias said quietly. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her eyes softened. Just a little, before she stepped back, her guard returning. You will stay in the palace, she said finally, in the royal chambers. That command sent a ripple of shock through the guards when they heard it. No outsider had been housed so close to her private quarters in living memory. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but obeyed. Some even murmured that this human's days were numbered. The court was not kind to outsiders, but as Elias was led away to his assigned rooms, he didn't look worried. Instead, he walked with the calm certainty of someone who had already survived worse. That night, as the 3 moons hung high over Zyrathia, the palace seemed unusually tense. From the high balcony, Lethera stood again, staring at the city lights. Somewhere in the guest wing, the human was settling in, unaware of the storm his presence had already caused, or perhaps fully aware and ready in the shadows below. Lord Vezrak's agents moved quietly, their eyes fixed on the wing where Elias Kane slept. The game had begun, and in the heart of the palace, the Empress felt it too. The arrival of the human was not an accident. It was the first move in something far larger and far more dangerous than anyone in the court could imagine. The council gathered in the Hall of Judgment, their faces hard and cold. The chamber was carved from black stone, its walls lined with banners of past rulers and champions. At the center stood Empress Lethara, her silver crown glinting under the pale light from above. Beside her stood Elias Kane, the human who had shaken the court with his quiet confidence. One elder stepped forward, his voice echoing. Your Majesty, the laws are clear. If any outsider wishes to stand at your side, he must face the trial of blades. The chamber murmured in agreement. The tradition was ancient, older than the palace itself. It was said that no one unworthy had ever survived. The Empress's gaze was unreadable. Are you certain you want this? She asked Elias quietly. Yes, he answered. I don't need to prove myself to them. But I'll do it for you. The trial would take place in the great arena, a place where the air seemed to hum with the echoes of past battles. From the stands, thousands of alien eyes watched as Elias stepped into the sand. He wore no armor, only simple combat clothes and a short blade offered by the arena's keeper. Across from him, 3 alien warriors waited, each towering over him, their armor heavy and weapons sharp enough to split stone. A horn sounded, deep and vibrating through the chest. The first warrior charged, swinging a massive blade. Elias moved quickly, sidestepping at the last moment, letting the heavy weapon strike only sand. Before the alien could recover, Elias slammed his elbow into the warrior's ribs, making him stagger back. The crowd gasped no. One had expected speed over brute force. The second warrior moved in from the side, a spear flashing in the sunlight. Elias dropped low, rolling under the thrust, grabbing a handful of sand and throwing it into the alien's eyes. It was a simple trick, but it worked. The alien roared, blinded for a moment. The human didn't waste time, striking the back of the alien's knees and sending him crashing down. Now only the third warrior remained, and he was the largest of them all. He didn't rush, he studied Elias, circling slowly. The crowd fell silent. Sensing the tension, the warrior lunged suddenly, his blade cutting the air in a deadly arc. Elias met the strike with his smaller blade, deflecting it just enough to slide past the alien's guard. In a heartbeat, he pressed his weapon to the warrior's throat. The horn sounded again, victory. The stands erupted into noise, some in cheers, others in disbelief. The human had done what few outsiders had ever done. He had won. And without killing a single opponent, Lethera watched from her high seat. Her hands clasped tightly together. When Elias looked up at her, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. She rose to her feet, her voice carrying across the arena. The trial is complete. His blood and honor are proven, but not everyone was pleased in the shadowed corridors beneath the stands. Lord Vezric watched with narrowed eyes the humans. Victory had not only humiliated him, it had made him a real threat. He turned to his closest guard, whispering, "We'll see if he survives the night." After the arena emptied, Elias returned to the palace. His arm wrapped in a bandage from a shallow cut, Lethera met him in the quiet of the garden courtyard, where moonlight glowed on silver fountains. "You fought well," she said softly, stepping closer. "I fought smart," he replied. "Strength doesn't always win." Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Perhaps that is why you still stand." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the fountains filling the air for the first time. The Empress let her guard drop just enough to speak from the heart. "You may not know it yet, but you have already changed the palace," she said. Elias tilted his head. Then, "I guess the question is what happens next." Her answer was a whisper, almost lost in the night air. "Next, we see if you can survive what's coming, unseen by them, in the darkness, beyond the gardens." Shadows moved. The first of Lord Vezrac's assassins had already entered the palace. The human had passed the trial, but the real test was about to begin. Asterisk night fell over Zyrathia, the three moons casting pale light over the golden palace. The halls were quiet now, the echoes of the day's trial fading into memory. But in the deepest corners of the city, far from the Empress's watchful gaze, whispers spread. Lord Vezrac's pride had been wounded beyond repair, and he would not let it heal. Inside a dimly lit chamber, Vezrac stood before a table covered in weapons-curved daggers, poison darts, and silent pistols. His most loyal assassins knelt before him, their armor black as the void. "You will enter the palace tonight," he growled. "You will kill the human before dawn." The assassins nodded without a word, melting back into the shadows like smoke. Meanwhile, in the royal guest wing, Elias Kane sat on the edge of his bed, cleaning his blade. The room was large and richly decorated, but his eyes kept scanning every corner. Years in the human fleet had taught him that danger rarely waited for morning. A faint sound caught his attention, a whisper of movement where there should be none. He set the blade down silently, his muscles tense. From the balcony, a shadow dropped silently into the room, followed by two more. Their steps were soundless, their blades glinting faintly in the moonlight. Elias didn't move until the first one was within reach. Then, with a sudden twist, he grabbed the assassin's wrist and slammed him into the wall. The second lunged, but Elias rolled across the bed, snatching his blade just in time to parry. The fight was fast, brutal, and silent. Steel flashed, shadows shifted, and the sound of sharp breaths filled the room. The third assassin tried to flank him, but Elias threw the first one into his path, sending both sprawling. With quick precision, he disarmed the second. Striking his jaw with the hilt of his blade, the man crumpled. Without a sound, Elias stood over the last assassin, his blade at the man's throat. "Who sent you?" he demanded in a low, steady voice. The assassin's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the city beyond. But he said nothing. Elias tightened his grip. "You're wasting your last breath." Before the man could answer, an arrow shattered the glass and struck the assassin in the chest. Elias spun toward the balcony, but the archer was already gone into the night. Within minutes, guards flooded the room, led by Captain Zarin of the Royal Guard. She froze at the sight of the bound assassins and the dead one on the floor. "You're still alive," she said, half in surprise, half in respect. "Barely," Elias replied, sheathing his blade. "You have a security problem." The report reached the Empress before the hour was over. She entered the guest chamber herself, her gown trailing over the broken glass. Her eyes swept over the scene, the weapons, the blood, the silent bodies, and then locked on Elias. "You fought them alone," she said quietly. He nodded. "Didn't have time to call for help." Her gaze softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You've made powerful enemies," she warned, "and they will not stop." "Then they'll just have to try harder," he said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips for a moment. She almost smiled, but then her expression turned serious. "This was no random attack. Lord Vezrak is behind this." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe it's time we stopped waiting for him to strike." The Empress tilted her head slightly, intrigued by his boldness. "You speak as if you've already planned it," she said. "Not yet," he replied. "But I know one thing: if we let him keep the initiative, we lose." She studied him in silence, the faint glow of moonlight catching in her silver crown. In that moment, she realized something the Council had failed to see. This human was not just a survivor. He was a strategist. "Tomorrow," she said at last, "I will summon the Council, and you will stand beside me." "That won't make me popular," he said. "You're already not popular," she replied. Her tone cool, but laced with quiet humor. As she left the chamber, the faintest trace of a smile touched her lips. In her long reign, she had never seen anyone face such danger in her palace and walk away stronger. The assassins had failed, but the message was clear. This was clear. This was only the beginning. And deep in the shadows of Zyrathia, Lord Vezrak swore the human would not live to see the next moonrise. Dawn broke over Zyrathia with a blood-red sky. The city below the palace buzzed with uneasy whispers. Something was coming, though no one knew what. Inside the throne room, Empress Lethera stood before the council, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Elias Kane stood to her right, silent but watchful, scanning the hall as if expecting trouble. Lord Vezrak was absent, and that alone set the council on edge. His seat was empty, his banner furled. Lethera's voice cut through the murmurs. "Last night, assassins entered my palace. They failed. But their attempt speaks of rebellion." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. "Do you accuse someone, Your Majesty?" one finally asked. Her eyes hardened. "I do," she said, "Lord Vezrak." Before more could be said, the massive doors of the throne room shook violently. A deep boom echoed through the chamber, followed by another. Then, the scream of the palace alarm filled the air. One of the guards burst in, his armor scorched. "Your Majesty, the outer gates have fallen. Vezrak's forces are inside the city." The council erupted into chaos. Lethera's voice rose above it. "Get the civilians to the lower vaults, now." She turned to Elias. With me, the two moved quickly through the palace corridors, the sound of blaster fire and clashing steel growing louder from the high balcony overlooking the city. The scale of the attack was clear. Dozens of armored carriers rolled through the streets, unloading squads of Vezrak's warriors. The golden gates of the palace courtyard were already in flames. Alien banners bearing Vezrak's sigil fluttered above the invaders. Elias's eyes narrowed. "He's not hiding anymore." "No," Lethera replied. "And he thinks force will win this day." Elias turned to her. "Then we need to fight on our terms, not his." They made their way to the war room, a circular chamber with a glowing tactical map of the palace. Elias studied the map quickly, pointing to narrow choke points and defensible halls. "If we block him here and here, his numbers won't matter," he said. The Empress listened carefully, then gave the orders without hesitation. Her commanders obeyed, even those who had doubted the human. The first wave of attackers slammed into the palace's inner defenses. Elias led a squad of palace guards to the southern hall, where the enemy tried to break through. Blades clashed, blasters roared, and the air filled with the sharp scent of burning metal. Elias moved like a shadow, striking hard and fast, his every action calculated. The guards, inspired by his fearlessness, held their ground in the main courtyard. Lithara herself fought alongside her royal guard. Her long silver spear moved with deadly precision, cutting down enemy warriors who dared to approach the site of their empress on the battlefield, sent her soldiers into a frenzy of loyalty. The invaders began to falter, but the battle was far from over. A thunderous crash shook the ground. The eastern wall had fallen. Vezrik himself strode through the breach, his black armor gleaming, his massive war axe in hand. His eyes locked on Elias, rage burning hotter than the fires around them. Elias stepped forward, meeting Vezrak's gaze without fear. "So you're the reason she refuses me?" Vezrak snarled. "No," Elias said calmly. "You're the reason she never choose you?" The two clashed in the heart of the burning courtyard. Vezrak's strength was overwhelming, strikes powerful enough to crack stone, but Elias was faster, weaving between the blows. Striking where the armor was weakest, they fought as the palace burned around them, neither giving an inch. Finally, Elias caught Vezrak off balance, driving the hilt of his blade into the warlord's chest. Vezrak stumbled, roaring in pain, but before Elias could finish it, the warlord's forces surged forward, pulling him back. Smoke and chaos swallowed the courtyard. "Fall back to the tunnels," Elias shouted to Lithara. Together, they retreated into the hidden passages beneath the palace. The tunnels were dark, carved centuries ago as escape routes for the royal family. Torches flickered, casting their faces in shifting light as they moved deeper into the underground. Lithara glanced at him. "Why do you fight for me?" she asked suddenly. Elias looked ahead into the darkness. "Because you're worth fighting for." The sound of pursuit echoed behind them. The battle was not over, only moved to the shadows. And in those shadows, the fate of the throne would soon be decided. The palace still smoldered under the pale light of the 3 moons. Smoke curled into the night sky, carrying the bitter scent of fire and war. The invaders had been driven out, their banners torn down, their dead left behind in the courtyards. But the cost had been heavy. Walls lay in ruins, halls were blackened, and too many loyal guards would never rise again in the council chamber. The surviving elders sat in tense silence. Whispers passed between them. The rebellion had been crushed, but it had also shown a dangerous truth. Zyrathia's throne was not as untouchable as they had believed, and standing at the heart of that victory was a human. Elias Kane entered the chamber beside Empress Lithara, his uniform torn and dusted with ash. The elders stared, some with open distrust, others with reluctant respect. He walked as though he belonged there, not as a guest, but as someone who had earned his place. Lithara took her seat on the throne, but she did not allow Elias to stand behind her. She motioned for him to stand at her side. "This council has seen enough of politics without courage," she said, her voice steady. "We were attacked from within, betrayed by one who claimed loyalty to the crown." Her gaze swept the room, pinning each elder in place. "But we stand here today because of this man," she continued, placing her hand lightly on Elias's arm. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Elias remained silent, but his eyes scanned the faces before him. Some elders looked away in shame, others stiffened in defiance. "This man," Lithara went on, "risked his life for this palace, fought beside me when walls fell, and stood between me and certain death. And so, by our laws and my will, I claim him as my mate." The chamber erupted, voices clashing in outrage and disbelief. "You cannot." One elder shouted, "He is not of our blood. He is human." Another spat, Lithera rose from her throne, her voice like steel. And yet, not one of you lifted a blade to defend your empress as he did. The room fell silent, the weight of her words cutting deeper than any sword. Tradition in Zyrathia was law. The empress chose a mate who had proven himself in blood and honor. The council could not overrule her, but that didn't stop the undercurrent of anger. Some elders muttered of ancient purity, others of dangerous change, yet none dared openly defy her. The announcement spread like wildfire through the city. Crowds gathered in the great plaza outside the palace. Some cheered, calling Elias the champion of Zyrathia. Others whispered that the empress had lost her mind, binding herself to an offworlder. 2 days later, the coronation was held. The palace was repaired enough for the ceremony, though the scars of battle remained as silent witnesses. The grand hall was filled with nobles, warriors, and envoys from allied worlds. Banners of silver and blue hung high, their edges still singed from the attack. Elias stood before the throne in ceremonial attire, black and silver lined with the crest of the royal house. Lithera approached, carrying the second crown in her hands. Her voice was clear, carrying to every corner of the hall. Before these witnesses, I name Elias Cain not only my protector, but my partner in rule. She placed the crown upon his head. The hall fell into stunned silence. Some bowed in respect, others hesitated. Their eyes filled with questions. Elias met their stares without fear. He was not here to be liked only, to stand where he was needed. When the ceremony ended, they stepped together onto the balcony overlooking the plaza. The crowd below roared, some in joy, some in anger, but all unable to deny the moments. Wait. Lithera raised her hand, and the noise slowly died. This is a new chapter for Zyrathia, she declared. One where strength is not bound by species or birth, but by loyalty and courage. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm, but carrying across the plaza. And, if you doubt me, you will see in time. They stood side by side, the 3 moons casting silver light over them, inside the palace. Whispers and schemes were already forming. There were those who would never accept him. But in that moment, neither cared. The battle had been won, the throne secured, and a new union forged under fire. Yet in their hearts, both knew the true storm had not yet begun. The news traveled faster than light, across the great trade routes, through the deep space relays, and into the hearts of empires. The Empress of Zyrathia had refused 10,000 suitors, had chosen a human, worlds that had never spoken. The name Elias Cain now whispered it in curiosity, envy, or anger. Some called it a scandal, others called it the most daring move in centuries. All agreed it had changed the political map overnight. Allies sent cautious messages of congratulations, their words polite but their questions sharp. Enemies saw opportunity, hoping the choice would divide the empire. But what none of them understood yet was that this union was not weakness, was a new kind of strength. In the weeks that followed the coronation, palace life changed. Elias refused the gilded life of a ceremonial consort. Instead, he worked alongside Lithera in the War Council, studying threats, inspecting defenses, and speaking to commanders. His human perspective clashed with tradition, but often brought solutions no one else had considered. Some nobles still refused to acknowledge him, but others began to see his value for the people of Zyrathia. He became more than the Empress's mate. Stories of the trial, the assassination attempt, and the storming of the palace spread through the markets and taverns. Children played games, pretending to be the human who stood beside the Empress. Merchants spoke of how he treated the guards and servants with the same respect as he did the highborn. In quiet corners, even his harshest critics began to wonder if perhaps he belonged. One night, weeks after the battle, Lithera and Elias stood together in the royal gardens. The air was cool. Carrying the scent of moonflowers that only bloomed under the 3 moons' light, they walked slowly along the silver-lit paths, the world outside the palace walls distant for a moment. "You know," she said softly, "before you came, I began to think I would never choose anyone." Elias glanced at her, because no one was worthy. Her lips curved faintly, because no one was real. She stopped at the edge of the reflecting pool, the water glowing faintly under the starlight. All of them came with speeches, gifts, or power to offer. She said, "But none of them saw me." Elias was quiet for a moment, then asked, "And you think I see you?" She looked at him, her gaze steady. From the first moment, silence fell between them, comfortable and unbroken in the distance. The faint hum of the city reached the gardens, a reminder of the empire they now shared. "You've changed this place," she said. "More than any law or war could have." He shook his head. "No. I just reminded them that strength isn't always about the biggest army." She smiled, and yet, they'll remember you as the one who stood alone in the arena, who fought in the burning courtyard, and who faced the council without fear. The sound of footsteps approached Captain Zarin, bowing slightly. "Your Majesties, a delegation from the Trelith worlds has arrived early. They insist on an audience." Elias glanced at Lethera, "And so it begins again." She nodded. "It never ends." But her hand brushed against his as they turned toward the palace. A silent promise in the smallest touch as they stepped back into the golden halls. The light catching in their crowns, the palace guards straightened. Servants bowed deeper than before. It was not just respect for the Empress anymore, it was acknowledgement of the pair who now ruled together. In the galaxy beyond, the legend was already taking shape. They would tell the story of the Empress who denied 10,000 suitors, of the human who came with no gift, no army, and no promise but his presence, and of how, together, they turned rejection into unity, danger into loyalty, and suspicion into legend. Under the 3 moons of Zyrathia, the empire endured, dawned, changed forever.